for Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. Being joined telephonically and also by Teams.
Teams, yes.
Teams, all right. So I would ask all those joining us in that by WebEx or by phone to mute your computer devices when you're not speaking and to state your name for clarity of the record when you do speak. All right, move on to the 15-minute public comment period. Are there any members of the public on this evening who would like to speak? See anybody on? All right, are there any members of the public on who would like to speak? All right, hearing none, if any members do arrive later, we can also reopen agenda item 2. Before we get started tonight, on behalf of North Public Utilities, we'd like to take a minute to recognize a fantastic employee joining us for her last NPU board meeting. Ruth Swift is retiring from NPU after a long and very productive career that spans 29 years. She's been our customer service manager since 2013, has provided excellent, exceptional service to thousands of employees day after day, year after year. Ruth has also been an important contributor to the overall growth and success of NPU through many changes and upgrades in our customer service functions and across our entire organization. Her diligence, hard work, patience, and willingness to work with our customers through the wide range of issues that pop up every week is greatly appreciated. On behalf of the NPU board and all of your coworkers, I'd like to extend to you our sincere thanks and appreciation for a job very well done for so many years. Ruth, you certainly earned your retirement, and we wish you many years of health and happiness going forward. I was thinking about retiring today, but I did not. Not from here for my day job. So okay. All right, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion, sir.
Thank you, William.
Sir.
Thank you, Michael. All right, is there any comments or questions on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved. We have 2 information updates which are in your board package. The first is the financial update. Are there any questions or comments concerning the financial update? I did not have any. I saw a small dip in the water for this month. I'm sure there's an explanation for that, for the funds.
Are we looking at just cash balance? Is that maybe just
Yeah,
timing?
it was just a balance.
It may be just the timing in
That's what I
regards to
figured.
payment for the state Expressway drinking water project.
All right. And if there's no questions on the financial update, we have leadership template. Are there any questions or comments on the template?
I have one question. I don't think it was on the template, but the water project that is underway today. Because street and Browning Road.
Yep.
Well, is the water line gonna come down Browning Road as well as go up Browning Road from the Mauritius?
No.
Because it looks like they marked out the road coming down the hill and going up. And I thought it was just going up the hill.
No,
it's on one side of the road.
It's not being connected together. Up top, as a matter of fact, we're running call it a spaghetti line. I think it's a 2 or 4 inch smaller line going up Browning Road because there's not much use.
Yeah, right.
So and that's going to only go partially up that hill.
That's a lot of money spent for 1 or 2 connections. But I thought it looked like it was marked, the road is marked out coming down, so I thought they was.
No,
Okay.
no, they may just, mark outs farther along or whatever.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I didn't think I had it. Well, That was it.
Okay, all right.
I do have one question.
Go ahead, Mark.
Probably Warren knows, but I noticed that the sewer division sales and revenue, that the actual sales are way down from the budget amounts. You know, like budget was 471,000, actual was only 293,000 change. So it's down by about 38%. I mean, usually things are a lot closer than that, not always. But is there a reason for that interdepartmental difference?
I think there were some bill credits that were processed, so the interdepartmental accounts that had to be corrected. So customer service went in and retroactively had credited some of the accounts that were erroneously billed for a little bit of time.
So previous billings were overbilled?
Yeah, so I think, I forget how long we were funded for, but we might have been funded up to a year on some of the interdepartmental accounts.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I mean, that sort of raises a follow-up question, which is how did he end up overbilling me? I mean, it doesn't sound like it's an insignificant amount. Sounds like it was a rather significant overbill. Was that wrong or?
They're interdepartmental bills, so there are bills.
Yes, there was there are, it's something that we can certainly dig into and provide at the next meeting.
All right. That hearing, we're all set with the leadership template. Then we move on to, we have 3 presentations this evening. And the first one, the Dudley Street substation repairs. I'll turn over to Jeff Ryan.
Yeah, Eric McDermott is out this week on vacation, so Jeff is pitch hitting on this one here, and he's been very involved in this anyway, so it's he's very up to speed on what's been going on out there.
It's been a busy week all around. So we were talking before the meeting. You go to the next. So one of the things we did as part of our, routine repairs and upgrades to substation, this particular one is Dudley substation over on Dudley Street. If you'll notice the embankment behind the substation, as we get more and more rain, more and more of that embankment is ending up back behind the substation. You can see on the right-hand side where it was actually up against the wall at that point. And our concern, obviously, if that building and the associated equipment out on the other side, we'd have significant sustained surface interruption. So what we did is, you see a little bit of a retaining wall on the backside there originally. We contracted it. It's actually construction, Coit firm did all the work. You go to the next slide. And basically dug the bank back, put some drainage in to relieve the water pressure behind, and then started stacking up these concrete retaining wall blocks. And if you'll notice, those are keyed so that they won't slide off, against the pressure of the bank. So pretty cool to watch. Only took about 6 days to do, but a very significant hardening of our infrastructure. And this is the end result. So we brought the wall up, with the drainage in, and put stone behind it so that we can drain, and then riprap on the top. So you can see to get a reasonable grade, we had to get very close to the building. But
What did that cost?
about 70,000.
How much?
70.
Wow, that sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah, that was actually the amount of work. Yeah, yeah.
He does great work.
Yeah.
He says, he does great excavation.
Yeah, we did it, and, the case that each one of those, can only put 4 of those blocks on the tractor trailer, so it's overweight, so it's not like.
Was that ledge in the back, Ryan?
It was, they had to come in with a, I don't have a picture of it, but they had to come in with a whole ramp and move some of the ledge, so we could.
Was it designed by CLA or did you do it?
I don't remember off the top of my head who designed it, but, I don't think it was CLA. I don't know off the top of my head this test. But anyway, you see the 1,000 line coming in. This is our tap off the air source system. Sheets out the station. So maintaining the integrity of that bank is important for several reasons. You go to the next one. And then we talked a little bit the last meeting about the breaker. This is breaker 515. This West Main Street Jerry Hill up that area, all fed off this breaker, so when we had the mouse get in there and get across, so all they have to do is get across one contact. And the science behind it ionizes the air, and then all three legs will mark out. So we had a very robust pest control program. We have a robust plus pest control program now. But it's all, in your houses, ice fields, things like that. And you go to the next picture. This is a view of the breaker from the end. The failed breaker, you see it's a three-phase circuit. So each one of those jaws goes into the cabinet, and see how it works. Goes in, the door opens, breaker goes in, and then ultimately makes contact. We energize it, and we can close it remotely via SCADA from the control room downstairs.
How's the supply chain issue right now? It was pretty bad last year.
It's better than it has been. In this particular instance, Circuit Breaker Sales, the vendor that we have our RFP out, we do this type of work for us. They were very responsive. We can rebuild the breaker in a couple of weeks.
Oh, this one has to get a new one.
This one was not salvaged.
So it wasn't so.
No, it was, picture doesn't do it justice, like a lot of things.
So they rebuilt another one for us?
They built another one for us. And, this is 60s vintage. And so if you think about it, a car, yeah, 60s, right? You don't necessarily go down to the market and get an alternator, right? But someone might be able to adapt one from another vehicle or rebuild one. This is not out of a jumper, but they have the specs that we should go to the next. This is the cabinet. The cabinet looks similar to the breaker. You see the windows in the back, and that's where the fingers, if I will, of the breaker actually go into the cabinet, into the switch here, make contact. And this is just a safety so that we have all our procedures for working around that, and all that good stuff. But again, we present any potential of accidental contact with the boss on the back, which is live. So in advance of the heat wave, we got the breaker, slid it in, reactivated it. We do switch circuits. From time to time, we'll notice an outages. We start with a big outage, then we go to a smaller outage, and we go to no. A lot of times that's done by switching to the system. We had switched, we can completely restore around this piece of infrastructure, but our idea was to get the system moving back into its normal configuration prior to the heat wave, and we didn't even think about the thunderstorms. That was it was good that we were in that position for the thunderstorms. So as mentioned, about two direct lightning hits Friday night onto 4800 kV primer. My 20 years, I never remember it's a direct hit on primer. It's effective, it's caused outages, not destroyed the wall. Can you go to the next one? This is different. So as part of our substation maintenance, I thought it was cool. So I throw it there. This is Bean Hill, and it sounds, when you go out in the backyard, it sounds like one of the cicadas. You hear the hot tub today, and what that is that it's called corona. It's actually the ionization of the air, correctly around. If you have a hotspot transmission system, this is on the Eversource side. This is that same thousand line, but the other end coming into your VDS substation. This is not something that can cause an outage tonight or even next month, but if it was left undetected, could cause an issue down the road. So we actually partnered with Ground. This is a piece of high-tech equipment that we've been evaluating. They had one, so they offered to come up this morning and take a picture of it for us. And sure enough, we found it's making the noise. So now we can get it.
So I'm a little confused. You said Eversource side. Never heard that.
So in the substation, you have transmission. And it is confusing. We have two transmission lines that in this particular case, this is a portion of the infrastructure that Eversource, I say it correctly, actually, operates. If that makes sense, they control how we operate it. But we will have to make it.
Eversource owns the transmission lines running through Norwich. We own the taps off of those. This here is on their portion of.
So they own the main lines coming in and we have the
Yeah,
distribution.
when you're driving down and you're seeing, behind Dime Bank, those, transmission lines like that, and anywhere throughout the state, Eversource owns the vast majority of that transmission. CMEC owns 6% of the state's.
Like the condominiums, Briar condos or those big lines.
Absolutely. That's the Eversource transmission.
So we said that we do the 34-5 conversion substations. Will we use the same substations and basically just, upgrade the equipment in them, or is it gonna be a more dramatic, rebuild?
It's a great question. And well, that's one of the things we're evaluating with the engineering right now. Because as I mentioned, we have 3 separate substations. Each of them are fed by their own transmission line. Now that we tie those substations together, that allows us, as we talked before, a couple of things. One of the things we'll be able to set renewable generation, battery storage, other things. So that's great. Also allows us to pack people in substation. Now, we do that in a more indirect way now for the system. This would be a much better way to do that. So short answer is we don't know, because we're also evaluating the hills, who knows, in the floodplain. So we're in the process of evaluating, do you harden the infrastructure? Do you relocate it? That's part of that design. And all of these components. So this is what we're trying to do, is to get it most efficient, most cost effective.
And so we've got potentially a big battery facility, out behind Walmart coming in. And a big battery facility, by Yannick Lane, that area where our water tank is. And there's been talk, I think, of them building a substation for us because they need it or contributing from substation. Collaborating. Is that gonna ease the burden?
Could very well. I mean,
And if we put that new substation in, Bob, that would be a 115 kV to 34, and then we would step the 34 down to our other distribution circuits. If we're just gonna connect the 3 substations, we can do it on the distribution side and not change that transformer. And that's where it's a cost benefit.
Okay.
And we can handle both. But if you were starting with new, you'd go 34.5 and then step down.
Yeah.
It's the most efficient. And those projects are, one is waiting for the RFP to hear the results, and the other is in the ISO queue for next year. So I would imagine, somewhere between September and next July, we will have feeling for what the probability of both those going for.
So Jeff, what's the fix for that? What do they have to do?
ultimately, that insulator needs to be replaced and the connection on the end. You have, we'll call it an arc. You have a beginning of a failure in that connection once that's created.
And they work on a live problem?
No, we'll apply it now.
So that's a fall timeframe outage. It's not urgent. If it was urgent, especially in the heat wave, you'd be struggling to make that happen easily. This usually happens in low load periods of time, and usually doing other work at the same time. This is done by Eversource.
So we're taking power off Eversource lines. So when we say we're buying electricity from CMEC, are those CMEC electrons, or it doesn't matter? We're just
CMEC wholesale electrons coming through Eversource transmission to our substation. No different than Groton, Jewett City, and the Norwalks.
who pays for the transmission?
That's part of our wholesale rate. So when we heat shave and run the microjet units, that is to lower transmission costs as well as capacity costs. Transmission costs, you pay capacity for the year. So if you pick the peak months and the peak of the year, when your max capacity is, you can trim that down and save money on the wholesale energy.
Okay, is that all set, Jeff?
All set? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we move on to the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, and then Mr. Steve Cinco.
Yes, he is pinch hitting for Larry, who unfortunately is out this week as well.
Okay, all right, Steve.
Okay, next slide. So, thank you. This is a view looking north towards Falls Mills Apartments that you've seen before. This is the old landfill. You can see they're making a lot of progress. They're using it as a storage area, and a staging area, as well as you're starting to see on the north end, starting to stockpile some of the excavation material that's taken up from other parts of the project throughout the island. This is the location of the new secondary settling tanks. This is on the along the east branch of the Yantic River. So that the excavation piling, as you see, that's the red piling, the sheet piling that they have installed. And then in the center there, they're excavating up a 20-foot deep hole so that they can start driving the piles down the bedrock to build the two foundations for the tanks themselves. And this is a close-up view of that same sheet piling. What they've done is they've had to actually tie it back into the sidewall as well to prevent it from caving in because they are excavating down 20 feet. That was completed this past month, and they're starting to remove material from the inside. As I understand, they have found some lead contamination in the material, and they have a method to remediate it throughout the process on site. I don't know what that is, but apparently there is a way to do it with the amounts that they're finding. They need to do that before they move any of that material up onto the landfill area. This is a nice aerial view of the entire project. Shows you a lot of the things that are going down. For the right-hand corner there, that's where we just talked about the secondary clarifiers. As you're moving down on the right-hand side, that's going to be a third clarifier that's going to be built adjacent to the existing one clarifier that we have. And over on the left side, that's a thickened sludge buildings that are going to be installed, and they started work on that area as well. So on the north side here, there's a lot going on. I'm showing all the excavations from the air, but there's a lot going on in the buildings as well. There's hatches being put into the roofs so that they can remove equipment from the basements of the buildings, things like that. Okay, this is the aeration tank number 2 demolition. We showed a picture of this last year. There's two tall walls in the middle, right where the orange excavator is. That wall was removed last month. This month they're removing the second wall. This is to make way for the new IFAS process that's going to be installed. This is a land level view of that same project. And the new IFAS process will aid in improved EOD and nitrogen removal, which is a huge part of this project. This is the location of new thickened sludge storage tanks. Last month this was flat, so they have installed all of the excavation piling, and they're starting excavation down to the foundation area now. There's so much activity going on down there. I don't know how they keep it straight, but they're doing a really good job with that. This is a couple things going on here. This is where we would chlorinate the effluent of the plant, and that's going to be replaced with a UV disinfection facility. So as part of that, we had to. There was a pump station here that we had to dismantle. There was an effluent diversion chamber, which is in the bottom left-hand corner. That had to be removed. We had to put some temporary piping in, effluent piping, to get around the whole construction of this. And just to give an indication of the size, down the left-hand corner, those pipes are 36 inches in diameter, so it's some huge structures that have to be removed. Requires some huge equipment to do that. And we started putting in foundation piling for the new lab and the admin building. The admin building itself on the right-hand side, that's going to be completely dismantled. But we are retaining the foundation for the new building, and we need a larger building, so we're going to tie this new area in with that building to build a new lab and the new admin building. So there's a lot of progress being made now. Maybe at some point in the future we can do a tour when there's something actually see that's a little bit more dirty.
You good?
Any questions?
All right, thank you, Stephen. All right, and that brings us to, this is the Department of Transportation PHMSA grant. That's Barry Ellison. Here you go, Barry.
Yeah, just gonna give you a brief update. I don't have any slide decks, because we haven't actually broken ground yet. But, so the 2022 grant, which as you recall is $10 million. We have a design plan that's 90% complete. We've been stuck on 90% for a little while, working through some Build America, Buy America details with the federal government, PHMSA, and really just finding the capacity to take the design plans to the final stage. We've just recently contracted with our design engineer to hire a PM on a contract basis, 100% funded by the grant itself. That person is going to start here on Monday and bring those plans to 100%, hopefully by the end of July. And we get that out in, early August, middle of August, for potential getting some pipe in the ground this fall. That is the goal. PHMSA is anxious to do it. We're anxious to actually do it. And so that's for a 2022 grant. And the 2023 grant, which we just were awarded, that was about 10.9 million. The first step in these grants is to apply and receive approval for a tier 2 environmental site assessment. That process takes about 2 to 4 months on our end. It gets submitted, they assess and analyze it for a month or two. So potentially we can have environmental approvals by late fall. Then we design the project over the winter and sort of slide that in and see where we have the capacity balancing what the work we have for 2022. And right now, we would expect the 2023 grant to start in 26 and in 28. So two-year projects between the 2022 and 23 grant. And then we just recently applied for a third grant in the amount of 10.6 million. Well, that's the 2024 grant. And that's to relocate 754 indoor gas meter sets to the outdoors. And we've targeted areas that were identified by the federal government, their climate and economic justice screening tool, as being disadvantaged. And that'd be Greenville, Yale Hill, downtown, Laurel Hill, and the east side. So those 754 are targeted in those 3 census tracts, based on the guidance given by the PHMSA grant.
How does moving meters from the inside to the outside deal with the disadvantaged status of people?
It doesn't. I was going to say asthma would be the first thing that comes to mind. The preponderance of asthma in low-income communities is much higher than just somewhere else. If you can move a meter outside, air quality in that home and in the surrounding homes is going to improve.
Really?
But also the more distressed areas of the community tend to be some of the older infrastructure in the community as well. So these the new standard is to move everything out. Everything is built outside, meters outside. And so it's a safety thing from Pura to move them outside, because the fire department, if they're responding to a odor of gas and they get there before us, if it's an outside meter set, they can shut it down. If it's an inside meter set, they can't necessarily safely get access.
The other reasoning for it is that the disadvantaged communities are seen as really being addressed last. So if we were going to take a project in here, not just Norwich, but any community, the thought process is some of the more affluent communities get their work done first, and all the other ones are waiting to the end.
My only thought before I asked the question and everyone answered it is that it made it easier for us to read the meters because we didn't have to go inside and see the meter. But I didn't realize there was a safety factor. So
Read the majority of them,
Yep, and future regulation. So if we are fortunate to get this award, we would start slowly in 2025, maybe doing 50 to 60 a year, and then ramp up significantly in 2028 when the prior 2 grants are completed and finish in 2030. That's it.
Thanks, Barry. Yep. Any questions for Barry? All right, thank you, Barry.
And we were able to get the first 2 grants because of the outstanding job our team did and put this application together. So we are, I'm not saying the expectations are really, really strong, but they have really thought we were excellent when it came to our submittals. So we won't be surprised if you didn't get it.
All right, well, then we'll move on to the efficiency program rate presentation. Krista, would you like to do the
Okay,
presentation?
so that's gonna be a combination of Mary Lou and Jeff. Okay.
So,
All right, next slide. So I'll just kick it over, off with a quick overview of what we're gonna talk about. Yeah, I know we do updates periodically, but just, Mary Lou's gonna do a quick review of the programs that we offer and some of the high-level details associated with those. Her and her team do an excellent job of managing this on a day-to-day basis. Then we'll get into talking about the finances of the program and how it's less funds to support it, what the status of those funds are, what we've spent on rebates. And we'll talk a little bit about rates, what the Conservation Road Management Fund, do a quick review on what that is. That's essentially the fund that supports all of this. And how we're currently collecting for that and what some options maybe going forward. You want to talk about the program?
Next slide. Under the energy efficiency programs, many of you have been aware of the AGS program, which is run by Lantern. It assesses and provides overall health and safety of your home by sealing ducts, sealing air leaks, hot water pipe insulation, and determination of any installation fees. Next item is CHIP and geothermal, which many of you have utilized in the past. Currently, it's at $1,200 a ton, up to $2,000 for integrated controls, which control whether you use your old system or your new system if you decide to keep both. And also up to $1,100 for the heat pump water heater.
We're going to focus on this one as we go through the presentation because this is like a win-win-win, right? You have majority oil customers converting to electric heat pumps, cooling and heat. In a lot of cases, you get cooling when you didn't have it before. And you convert your heating from oil, which is carbon heavy, to electric, which is much less. It's also now revenue coming into the city, 10% of which we pay into the city under that fund as well. So, and it saves a customer money. So we're going to talk about this program.
Helps everybody. The installation rebate, fuel line, whether you're oil, gas, electric, we'll provide rebates for the exactly $1.50 per square foot for ad, $1 per square foot for wall installation. We have customized initiatives for our commercial customers, which is 25% incremental, material only for specialized high efficiency manufacturing equipment outside of our commercial buildings. New construction and major renovations, which is a rebate that allows for major renovations, which is classified under 50% of your building being renovated or new construction. It's 25% incremental difference of what code is and what is above code. That includes lighting and production equipment only, no building envelopes, no windows, insulation would fall under the insulation. Commercial lighting, 25% rebates on lighting interior disposal costs for high efficiency LED lighting installations. As we've seen, is we feel that everyone's addressed the LED situation in the COVID days and even prior to that, it costs money to do LED upgrades. So we're seeing an uplift of people, commercial businesses after COVID taking advantage of this rebate. The VFDs, that's $100 per horsepower. Pool choice rebate. Many people just have central air or just heating for ducts or ductless. That's $200 and $300 a ton based on your SEER rating. Gas expansion, $1,000 conversion incentive, and for furnaces, boilers, water heater rebates based on the efficiency. So it goes from like $250 to up to $1,200.
That's an interesting one too. We don't talk a lot about gas expansion that much anymore, but I always say there are a couple dozen new gas services here and more. We're starting to see more of an uptick again in that. So that continues.
And then we've added a couple of things in our Energy Star appliances. We've always had the air conditioners and window units, but we have storage tank water heaters and also the heat pump water dryer. Next slide. The electric vehicle and charging rebate. Under that, the electric vehicles, which some people have taken advantage of, we're looking at for all electric for new purchases, $1,500, $1,000 for any hybrid, and for any used vehicle of 2020 or newer, $500 to $1,000, depending on whether it's electric or hybrid. And charging equipment. Up to $1,000 purchase for residential use for any level 2, $3,000 for commercial, for workplace charging for public or multifamily, $4,000 for commercial use for anything that's general commercial or public location. And this is charger per head. I mean, per charger versus per head. That's the cost of chargers. So we have chargers at 2 ports.
Oh,
They only get the rebate for the charger itself and not per port. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff.
Great, thank you. So, I actually started this program back in 2006. And fund balances have gone up and down. But one of the biggest, or the biggest fluctuation by far that we saw in our fund balances, starting here, it's, it's small and hard to read, but that's May of 2021 is the first column on the graph left there. And during COVID, everything stopped. We know that. Immediately, people didn't want to spend money. So I said, you know what? We don't want people in our homes, businesses. We don't necessarily want people in our business. We also don't want to spend. And there's a lag. Everything that we see, with these programs, there's a lag. We want to see someone else try it first. That kind of thing. So, this shows a bit of the tail end. I mean, COVID started right in the spring of 2020. But you can see that our fund balance is $2 million. Normally, it was around a quarter of that or less. And, we had plenty of money in the bank. Then we came and we introduced, I'll show it in subsequent slides. This is a problem you want to have, right? You have a highly successful program. It's well subscribed, it's creating load. It's also consuming rebates. So that we'll talk a little bit about that. You see, the fund has just continually declined over time, down to the point where I think it bottomed out around 250,000, maybe a little bit lower, but back up by the end. And toward the end, when we see it leveling out, we essentially stop pushing all of these programs with rebates back. We haven't any advertising and shipping here. Simply because we're going to run out of money. We don't have any way to pay for it unless we were to take it out of operating revenues. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Last year, we acknowledged that, our conversation that we had a year ago. Yeah, about lowering it to $2,400.
So if you look at what I have here, it's basically, and actually back an extra year here, what our efficiency rebates were total. So that's total expenses. And from a budget point of view, generally we will budget to spend, collect from the program each year. And you see in 2020, again, in the midst of COVID, we only spent $280,000 that year, which was very low. 2021, it's beginning to move a little bit, up to 790, and then in 2022, again, it's the majority of this program, 1.5 billion in that year alone. But that wasn't just JET. There were a lot of commercials that were holding back, conserving their capital improvement budgets. And you see in 2023, the start of the effect of us beginning to throttle things back a little bit to see where it went. And year to date, you can see the numbers right here. Now, if you look at the second column over, and specifically the 2 highlighted areas, that shows what we're expending on chip. So in 2023, at a $1.3 million expenditure, that's not necessarily a bad thing because that's largely residential or largely residential. So, Panema, all humans. West Wedge, Denny properties, all humans. You go to Riverview, that's heat pumps.
Commercial properties.
Everything. So not just residential homes, but also small commercials. Yeah, all guaranteed electric load for the life of that. Good thing. It's a savings. And then we showed, one of the things I'll also point your attention to is the EV charge. We just haven't seen it take off. Yeah. And, it's coming, but I think everybody just questions what the time frame is on that. Past the early adopters, so we'll over here. And now I think we got to kind of see how that transitions. We're ready, but we don't anticipate huge rush on that one. Okay, so then we always like to do this, in general, we'll do it on an annual basis. We just want to look at, based on budgeted revenue, where we're collecting. When I started this program, it was about 60% commercial and 40% residential paying. So we tried to have equity in that, and we paid some. Now it's very close to 50-50. If you take large commercial and small commercial, if you add it together, just basically looking at the right-hand column, the left-hand column is consumption, number of customers, and basically average consumption per customer. Really look at the highlighted one on the right. We'll see if you add the large commercial and small commercial, which we have a lot of small commercial customers here. It's about 45-50 miles. Next slide, please. All right, so this leads to what I wanted to talk about tonight. And we realized that in order to support these programs in the way we have in the past, get back to market and chip, and achieving the value that we talked about there. I don't know if I mentioned it in the early slide, but that's it's about 250,000 a year we're bringing in based on chips installed to date. Not a gargantuan number, but a steady, predictable, consistent number. So currently, per legislation, we collect 2.5 tenths of a cent. So 2.5 bills. 0025. So think about that. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I still got to get that straight. So that's the way, based on the legislation. In order to restore the programs, this is based on projections from management of the county, we would believe we would need something in the range of 4.8 cents, 4.8 tenths of a cent per kilowatt hour. So what does that mean to regular customers? So let's start with the residential. Right now, on an average residential bill, which is 670 kilowatt hours at this point, that's $1.70 a month. Paying. If we were to increase it, it would be about $1.30 additional, or additional, or about between $15 and $16 additional per customer. Not significant relative to the benefit. If you look at the commercial customers, obviously that gets a little more from your small commercial, but it kind of gives you an indication of the relatively low average consumption for the small commercial and large commercial.
Excuse me, Joe.
Yeah.
$1.70 is the current bill for a month for a residence?
Yes.
Or is that
energy efficiency?
that program?
Just for. So that's a good question. Let me take a step back and make sure I didn't pass something. So on your utility, there's actually a line item that says energy. And that's this 2.5 tenths of a cent per kilowatt hour. That's a flat rate, any customer, whether you guys are residential, whether.
So that finances all your energy efficiency projects?
Right, everything I talked about up to this point. Yep.
That's how you pay for it.
Exactly. So we're talking about, we haven't adjusted that rate since 2008. So obviously cost has gone up, inflation has gone up. We're not able to spread those dollars as far. We've got very successful programs, but we can't continue on, with the budget that we have. So, and our sales are flat now, slightly increasing, but not, certainly not at the rate of inflation per unit basis. So if you look at that line item on your bill, and your average customer, right, everybody's above or below, but it's 671 kilowatt hours, that charge would be $1.70 per dollar. And if we were to adjust the rate to 0.48 cents, then it would be $3.04. Does that make sense?
Well, they're already paying,
$1.
It's a $1.34 increase.
yeah,
$1.34 per month. So that's about a $15 increase per year. For comparison, the investor-owned utilities, they have this thing called public benefits charge, right? That's about 1.7 cents in totality. It has all sorts of stuff in it. It has back balances from COVID, it has energy programs and all sorts of things. Energy efficiency broke up just the energy. That's 6 cents. So if you were in Eversource territory, you'd be paying $4.08 per month for the energy programs. We can do it more efficiently. We can spread those dollars further. So we're not here tonight to ask for that level of funding. But we do believe we would need the middle. That's what the staff recommended level is. Again, we haven't adjusted this since 2008. In order to, we'd like to get into market ship again and continue that low growth, but we don't dare do it because we don't have any money to pay.
so when we adjusted rates a few months ago, one of the considerations, I think, was that sewer rates were gonna double over 8 years, basically.
That's the next presentation.
Yeah, I understand that. And water rates were going up. The gas was going down and electricity was going down, and then the entire bill would be down some. If we increase the electric rate to include the higher contribution for energy efficiency, what does that do to that balance?
Hardly enough.
And we get the exact number, Bob, because we're not asking for any action tonight.
Yeah.
So this would be part of a public hearing in August. So and Jeff will go on to the next steps.
It's 5 to 6 cups of coffee. When you look at order of magnitude.
The last time we increased it was 2008.
2008. So when the original legislation was put in place, they wanted to phase it in. So we actually, I forget what it was, I think it was 1.8 tenths of a cent to start with, and then it ramped up to the 2.5 over 3 years. So that's, and then it has not changed since 2008. Now, obviously, the investor-owned utilities have been going up every year on a regular basis, but we've been able to get by with it to this point. We had that cash left over from COVID, right? So we wanted to spread that as far as we could. We're there.
So we were talking about this earlier, I think, just a conversation about, say, the JB Martin factory at the corner of Franklin and Willow Street. And NCDC's hope that at some point they'll be able to convert it to apartments. Is something like this an inducement for somebody that wants to do a project like that?
Absolutely. This is it's essentially an economic development incentive. Because we're able to work with, such as the other projects, and help reduce those initial costs.
85 million used utilized.
Did they? Okay.
Yes, they do.
We work with NCDC.
Hill Mills,
No.
you know, all the big apartments.
As soon as they operate.
But the Getty properties in Panema are,
Yeah.
those are significant.
And it's not gigantic, but I went down there for the Biz reunion, and I was impressed by the film. It's really.
Big Bell Arts Theater.
Yeah, making a lot of progress. I mean, it looks beautiful. I was really impressed.
The Hill Mill?
Yeah.
I've been seeing it in about 2 months, and they're doing work on it.
Yes. It looks beautiful.
Stone in there, but it's gorgeous. I mean, it's massive building blocks, perfectly level. Just the architecture is unbelievable. From the original building.
And the plan is still a hotel, not a apartment.
Yeah.
So you're sitting on not advertising chip. Obviously, the bigger customers know that it's there, they're utilizing it, but other people putting in heat pumps, do you think that just don't know about the program and they're not asking for the rebate?
I think the potential is there that that's occurring, and one of the biggest problems that we find working with customers is when generally you don't replace something like that, like a car, well, the car's sitting on the mileage, go out and buy a new car, right? But we find that people with their heating systems, cooling systems, you wait until Sunday afternoon when it's 90 degrees, 100 degrees, and it doesn't. And then, what can I get, and what can I get quick? You know what, if it's put the boiler back in because I don't have any heat in the middle of the winter, we're gonna do it. right? And what we're trying to train customers to do is work with us, whether they sign up with Barry's team to do gas service, or whether they do, the majority of them are going with the heat pumps, they're planning for it, and then they're doing that proactively. And one of the biggest books we have, a lot of people are using indoor air conditioners. If you go to these split air conditioning systems, yeah, right, it's a lot more convenient, you don't have to put them in and out, a lot more efficient. So you gain the heating load, but a lot of times with the really books, air conditioning, understanding the advantage. But I think it's education, we've always said this from the beginning of the program, one of the most critical things is education.
Understanding we're not marketing. The contractors know we have these programs. So what people are saying is, well, there's a great program, I'm gonna go find a contractor. If I have a broken system or I hear I want these things, the contractor will drive the work program.
If they come in and ask us straight up, is gas better for me? Is heat pumps better for me? Or should I stay with oil and get an inverter? I mean, they're coming in and asking us these questions.
Even though the homeowner may not be aware of the program, the contractor would be aware.
But they have to go to them first. And the problem is us promoting it through Norwich,
Yeah.
it's the other way around. We're educating people to then go
Sure.
to, the R&Ws and so forth, not R&W.
I guess what I was suggesting is we start advertising again, you're expecting a big inrush of customers that bought a heat pump last year. To show up and say, hey, I didn't know it's a
Occasionally, but not as many should think. Yeah, not as many should think. I think one of the challenges is that not all contractors are necessarily supporting. And so what we generally hear is, oh geez, I got a new boiler 2 years ago, and I wish I put it in. But it wasn't presented.
So when someone comes in and asks you that question, should I get a new boiler, heat oil, or, I mean, the options would be a heat pump or a propane burner or something like
Well,
that.
we like to see whether there's gas available.
Oh, yeah.
Always do that, we provide that information, and we also provide them the chip
Yeah.
tell them the benefits. So we have both conversations.
But generally speaking, you're leading away from the oil burner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You look at it from an environmental point of view and cost.
That's what I would assume, but.
So if we were to go to the recommended amount per kilowatt hour, would that be to recapitalize the program and increase the volume of customers we could serve? Or would it increase the compensation per customer?
Decapitalizing. You don't anticipate increasing the incentive. Okay. For instance, chip 1200 is a sweet spot, seems to be where we need to be. We just couldn't do enough.
All righty, is there any?
Okay, more slides. I think we talked about it, like Chris said, no action needed tonight, but at some point we would looking for direction from the board and selecting a proposed rate. Maybe 3 of the jobs, and would require a public hearing. So our thought was to align that with the sewer rate public hearing we're going to talk about in a minute here. And then that would be implemented at the same time. So this way we can take advantage of communication and everything, do all that in parallel.
That's the idea. I mean, sewer rate is really going up now. I understand that the actual dollar amount is not as high as electric bills. But I mean, I can see some of the normal critics here having a fit over the sewer bill.
So we went up, what did we go up last year?
12%.
And not a peak.
Yeah, you're
So,
right.
and I think what is being proposed, I think that it will be crazy because it's like $12, $13 a month.
Yeah.
I also think that between the building of new schools, the roundabouts, city council, budget negotiations and ongoing,
Yeah.
people don't need to be added so many things. And we are below the radar for this, for $12 a month. I don't think this is going to get out now in 3 or 4 years. We're going to have to, we're going to have to, I'm not saying to sort it out, but I think through the next year, people are, if people are going to be upset at MTU, it's not going to be.
My only point is, I don't care, what you do, but I mean, my only point is, it might be better to do separate public hearings.
This is, I think,
But-
I think for $1.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's-
yeah.
It's more than.
All right, thank you, Robert. All right, I guess we're finished. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. We'll move on to the sewer cost of service study and rate design. Chris, who will be presenting this?
Laura's going to kick it off, and we will have consultants who join in as she moves along.
Thank you. Yep. So I'd like to start the presentation by reintroducing everyone on the team who worked so hard on this project for the past 6 months. From Baker Tilly, we're pleased to welcome back Russ Hissam and Amanda Lisinski. Russ and Amanda have been working with NPU for the past year and a half. They were leads on the project last year when we did the cost of service and redesign for all 4 utilities last year. As you can see from the screen, Russ and Amanda have extensive backgrounds in the utility industry, including accounting, cost of service, cost allocations, and rate making. From the NPU team, we have Brent Terry, one of our two financial planning analysts. He was the lead on this project as well as the lead on last year's project. And Val Kent, our other senior financial planning analyst, she supported the project with her in-depth knowledge of our capital projects, grant funding, and compliance requirements. Next slide. So in the previous work that we did with the Baker Tilly team, they were selected through an RFP process in December of 2022. We did the 5-year projections by utility, including financial targets, KPIs, the rate track, and the review of the 10-year capital plan. Through that process, we developed the allocated cost of service study for all 4 utilities last year, including a 3-year rate track, which we did for all the utilities with the exception of sewer. Included in that analysis was the economic development and low income rates for electric, which were subsequently implemented. As part of last year's project, we had board presentations given to the board in the summer of 2023 to review the cost of service and the rate tracks. The project also included providing the cost of service and rate design models to NPU for future use. And we'll see the results of that for the sewer cost of service shortly. And the final rate designs for last year's project were implemented in November of 2023. So the current project is the sewer cost of service study and rate design. So we updated the model developed in the summer of 2023, and that was reviewed by both the NPU team and the Baker Tilly team. There were expense forecasts, updated 10-year capital plan, review of the billing determinants, debt service, and other operating revenues. And this also included updates from the wastewater treatment plant construction, changes to cost, the timeline, and the debt. The rates were developed that reflect the cost of service for board consideration. And again, we are recommending the single year rate change versus a multi-year rate track, again, because of the multitude of variables related to the wastewater treatment plant construction. Specific updates in this cost of service study related to the wastewater treatment plant were the changes of the in-service date, which was moved from 2030 to 2028. We had updated the timing of expenditures to reflect the contractor's current estimates. In the prior assumptions, the timing of the expenditures was spread much more evenly over that 7-year window. The updated estimate has significant expenses in the first 3 years of the construction, and the timing of those expenditures also impact the timing of debt. Under the new schedule, that debt service is onboarded significantly earlier and at a higher level than was previously assumed and estimated. And that significantly changes our debt coverage ratios and our covenant requirements. Other items that were updated in this process include the capital investment, sales volume changes, and increased costs for O&M and depreciation. So overall, our objectives of this project were to meet our financial targets that promote financial health for NPU. We want to make sure we're evaluating the return on rate base, meeting our debt covenants, following our internal policies, and reviewing our cash forecasts. We want smooth and steady increases over time. that meet the recover cost of service and move our customer classes closer to cost of service again over time. And now I'm going to turn it over to our consultants, Amanda and Ross, to go over the process and the results.
So I'm going to go over the general overall rate study process over the next few slides, and then I'll turn it over to Russ, who will discuss MPU's actuals. So the rate study process consists of three main steps. The first is to develop the revenue requirement, and then you want to analyze the cost of service, and finally develop the rates, assigned rates. So for the revenue requirement, basically what you need to do is determine the amount of revenues needed to cover the cost of serving your customers. And that includes these operating expenses, which are based on budgets and historical trends. Depreciation, which is the reduction in the life of your assets, and it provides funds for asset replacement. And the return on rate base, which is based off of the cost of debt and equity, and the industry best practice is 5%. And the return on rate base provides funds for debt service and the inflationary increases that you'll have on your utility client service. The next step is the cost of service analysis. And here you want to group your cost into cost functions. So like volume would be domestic volume, regular domestic volume. Organics means the high strength volume. Has more pollutants than standard domestic strength. Billing and customer costs would be like meter reading and customer billing. And then you want to allocate the forecasted revenue requirement by these functional groups. And the FERC method is the industry standard method for doing this. And fixed costs are demand related and variable costs are volume related. Then you want to allocate these costs to the customer classes. You want to directly assign costs whenever possible. And for any costs that cannot be directly assigned, then you would allocate the remainder using industry standards. And for the rate design, the first thing you want to do is determine the overall rate increase needed by looking at the difference between the projected revenues at the current rates and what the forecasted revenue requirement is. And then you would develop the rate objectives and revenue targets for each customer class and develop customer rates based on those revenue targets. And then you want to review the cost of service versus the revenue. So the difference between the calculated cost of service and the revenue at the current rates. And you want to start moving the customer classes towards their cost of service. So if you have a customer class that is lower than their cost of service, like the revenues are currently lower, you would want to increase their rates faster. And if you have a customer class whose revenues are currently higher than the cost of service, you would want to maintain those rates or increase them at a slower pace. And then finally, you would recommend rate changes, and that would be, to move customers closer to their cost of service and to meet revenue targets that you have. And I'll let Russ take it from here.
Sorry, for my slides, I'm gonna step up here. I got a lot of numbers on my slides, so it'll be a little easier to point it when I'm talking about for you to follow along. So continue. So when it comes to setting rates, there's some key financial metrics that that you need to keep in mind and keep a handle on and build into the rates. The rate of return, as Amanda said, so a 5% rate of return on your investment in infrastructure is an industry standard, and that was used in the models here. And then you want to set your operating income target to fund your debt service and then inflationary increases. And the historical cost of the utility plant service, because depreciation just covers the original installed cost. And as you know, inflation drives up the cost of replacement, so you build that in as well. Then you have debt service coverage, and debt service coverage is this. It says that for every dollar of principal and interest payments, you need to have an operating cash flow over and above that. So this is a calculation of that, but the minimum requirement is 1.2 times, meaning $1.20 of cash flow for every dollar of debt principal and interest. And so that is the bare minimum. Anything below that, you're in technical default of your Clean Water Fund bonds, And so you want to keep that in mind when you're building the rates. You actually want a level higher than that for comfort and fluctuations in operations and revenues and cash flows as well. And then the cash balances. This is the unrestricted cash that you have on hand. So a good target to have is what the rating agencies require of you for a AA rating. So Moody's says for a AA rating, you should have 150 to 250 days of unrestricted cash on hand. And then secondly, the operating, the debt service fund reserve for the state of Connecticut, you need to have that funded as well. And then your sinking fund requirements on your debt management policy, you also need to meet that requirement as well. So it looks pretty slick.
Yes.
Or did you-
No, you did.
Oh, okay.
Good job.
All right. Well, let me go to this
I have
side.
a quick question.
Yes, sir.
The 5% rate of return.
Mhm.
I understand if we were a private company, we want a 5% rate of return or maybe a higher rate of return. It'll be our profitability. What does NPU do with the 5% rate of return number that presumably is in excess of expenses?
Well, that 5% rate of return is based on a combination of your debt and your equity. So on the debt side, you take the interest rate that you pay on debt, which is fairly low, 2 to 3%. But then on the equity side, you want to have an earnings rate of return on your retained earnings, for lack of a better term, in order to commence, what's the right word? To reimburse or want to have a rate of return on that retained earnings in order to reflect part of the risk of being in business, provide cash flow, not only for that debt service, but for that inflationary increase in the level of infrastructure that you have to replace, and things like that. So if you were like an Eversource, their standard rate of return is probably in the 10 to 12% range because you have the advantage of having low interest rate debt, but you also have that retained earnings component, that return on investment component that you need to still give you that cash flow. And if you don't have that cash flow, you're not going to need that 1.2 coverage on your debt that you're required as well. Okay, so,
Sir, in the last 10 years, what do you think the average increase in replacement cost has been for this treatment plant?
well, we work with a tool, there's a consumer price index for utility replacement of plant. We call it the Handy Whitman Index. And you know how the CPI works. It started in the 70s at a level of 100 and it goes up every year. I would say probably over the last 20 years, inflation of replacement infrastructure runs ahead of the general inflation.
It seems like 5% isn't going to cover it.
Right, yeah. Yeah, especially in recent years too. I mean, there's when you replace assets, the rate runs a lot higher. On the electric side, you got a transformer shortage, things like that. So the costs are rising a lot faster than the general rate of inflation. And those inflationary increases really aren't baked into the general inflation rate that you might hear about, every month when it's reported.
Once we're operating the sewer plant, we're going to be depreciated. So, I mean, the depreciation is going to be significant.
He's adding 5% on top of the cost.
Yes.
Like the cost, our $200 million sewer plant was $100 million 10 years ago.
That's why I remember the 5% didn't even cut it.
Yeah, I just looked at the presentation from 2009 that I did, and it was a $40 million plan, 2009. Same one.
Yeah, when I started in, I think it was around 100,000.
Yeah, and then before it went off the bid, it was 150, and after bid, it was 200.
I mean, it's like jumping up.
Yeah.
Raise.
But also, I would guess that if you look at the sewer plant, for example, we depreciated it for whatever the full depreciation schedule is. And then we continue to operate it year after year after year after that.
Absolutely.
With a significant investment of an O&M. Absolutely.
That's a done deal.
There was that too, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you for the questions. All right. Okay, so as the model was developed on what, what should be recommended for sewer rate increase or sewer rate change for 2025, first thing you need to do is look at where we would go with current rates. So this schedule here shows what revenues and expenditures will be at current rates. And the one that you focus on here is the operating income. When you compare that to that rate of return on rate base, which is at 5%, and you see that at current rates, there's a shortfall in revenues of about $666,000 for 2025. That's just if you do nothing. And you see the change as we go out. We get the big jump here in fiscal 28 when the plant comes online. Right now we're talking about 2025 rates, but you can see the trend when it comes to that. So that's the first thing you look at is where's our operating income going to shake out for that. And then you look at another look at the same thing is to look at charges for services at current rates. You compare that to the cost-based rate, which is your forecasted cost of service for the coming years, and you see that difference right there. So you need to do something with rates. So what should that be? Look at also the other metrics, operating cash. So that these cash on hand are forecasted to be 150 days cash, 150 days of cash on hand in 2025. You see that quickly goes negative in the out years if you do nothing. Debt service coverage, you're not meeting debt service coverage at current rates, which is something that would need to be addressed. And then which leads to that operating income variance of a rate increase that is needed to remedy those two metrics as well. So that leads you to the conclusion that rates should be moved towards the cost of service, and as you folks have been talking, revenues need to increase by 140% by the time the new plant comes online. Current rates are not adequate, and 3 rate design options were looked at as part of the model development. So a 12.1% rate increase, which is a continuation of the rate increase that you had last fall. A 24.4% rate increase, which will help meet the cost of service by 2028. And then in the middle, a 17.1% increase, which is a balance of that to get you to where you need to be, but not as drastic as a 24.4% increase and a 12.1% increase, as we'll show you here in a moment, doesn't get you where you need to be. So first one, here's the operating summary with a 12.1% increase, and we're talking just 2025. And looking at that operating income line, comparing that to the return on rate base, you see that operating results will come in over what the rate of return is indicated at. So you see that for each of the years. But what this does is that, one of the rate philosophy tenets or foundations is that rates should be slow and steady. They should not take, quick jumps, or they should not go up and down. It should just be as slow and steady. If you know you have a situation coming up in several years that you need to fund, you don't want a big increase in that 2028 year, but you want to get there in a gradual basis. So this 12.1% increase, while it gives you more revenues or more operating income than a rate of return in the early years, doesn't quite get you where you need to be by 2028. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2 with a 24.4% increase, provides additional operating income over the rate of return on rate base in the early years, but by 2028, you're there. You're where you need to be based on this scenario and what we know today. Granted, things are going to change as we go here, but this is what it looks like today. Again, we're just talking about 2025. So the third option, 17.1%, kind of has the best of both worlds. It provides operating income over and above the rate of return. And so you have a additional operating income in the early years And what it does is over a 5, 6, 7 year period, it does get you where you need to be when the plant comes online in 2028. So, from our perspective, this was a good recommendation, not too conservative, not too aggressive, but right in the middle. Something that I think that would meet your goals of having the cash flow, meet your metrics, and that when the plant comes online. Again, rating, the 17.1% we're talking about is just for 2025 at the current point. Things change, and but that's how it looks at present day.
So after 2028, we're not.
After 2028,
It's still increase.
so then you're caught up, and then you just fund the plant. The plant's online, it's operational. You have inflation, things like that. So there'll be rate changes after that, but they'll be back like you're back to normal when it comes to operating the plant.
And when we adjusted rates the last time, I understand we didn't set them for 8-year period, but we looked at rates for 8 years. And now we're looking at rates for
5 years last year. We did 5-year projection.
Each year we do a 5-year projection.
I was showing.
No, when we talked about the plant several times with
Yeah.
the consultants and the engineering, I believe it was it CDM Smith that
CDM.
came in? They gave a multi-year projection and
Okay.
showed that we would be at a 10+ year window of rate increases.
Okay.
Of course, that was before we had a $200 million number. So
Yeah.
again, every time we get more information, it changes what our future looks like. We know that we're looking at 140% rate increases over time. It's just a matter of how long that time looks and how we implement that and how we smooth that impact over to customers.
And just so I understand the capital expenditure, there's a second phase of what we have to do with sewer plant, isn't there?
Yeah, that's part of that CSO long-term control plan. And that is something where we've done an affordability analysis, and we're working on an update to that with the state now. And we're looking at pushing that out to keep the affordability reason. So we're trying to push those projects out beyond this window here, back out beyond 2030 year.
Sam, what's the plan is paid for in 2028? And the number at the bottom of the way coming down. So our shortage is coming down. So that means that the rates won't be going up anymore. They'll be leveling off, or they'll be going down.
So what I anticipate we will see is a period where we'll have the rates go up. Again, we know that something is going to change every year. Be it construction costs, be it a timeline, be it the amount of debt we're onboarding. So we will have rate increases over the next several years. And it will probably be somewhere around 5 to 10 years as we go through this window where we get through the sewer plant construction and we stabilize, and then we have a future plan as to what the next 10 years is going to bring, because we always have to look on a long-term horizon. We're making decisions today based on what we anticipate coming forward, but the further you look out, the more your assumptions have a lot more, the more your forecast have a lot more assumptions in it, the more variables there are. So we continue to move that forward.
As we get through this window, depreciation's coming down, but costs are still going up. Chemicals, for electricity, for all of the other commodities and cars.
There's always inflation, so there was also a natural upward trend, but all these rate increases here are paid for the plan,
Yes.
Yes.
for the most part. So when that's done, and then when the train is in 10 years from now, then maybe.
So the rate increases now are part of increasing to pay for the plan, but also we have our other metrics that we have to meet. We have to meet that debt service coverage. We cannot be in technical default. That would be a horrible situation. So we're trying to balance that 140% rate increase we need over time with the drastic impact to customers and the longevity. This plant is not going to only last for a few years. It's going to last for a longer period of time. And we want to work that window and balance all those things.
We'll have some more discussion on this as a presentation.
Just so you know, in front of you, you all have a copy of this presentation. There are a lot of little numbers on this screen. So if you want to look through that, and if that helps, I just want to make sure that you realize you all have a copy of this. It may be easier to follow along on some of the numbers on your hard copy.
So, I mean, first of all, I'm gonna go plant a rosebush on my septic system. But, we always talk about the sewerage charge for people is not that high. in dollars. And so a percentage increase is not as material as if it was their electric bill, for example. But, I mean, one of the questions I think we ought to at least think about is, what about some of the businesses and industries and so forth in Norwich, and what sort of change in their cost is this going to affect?
And we'll have some typical customer information at the tail of this presentation.
All right.
And following up on that, we've heard from laundromats in the past, they're already paying a lot more than other cities right now. So they're gonna not be happy.
It's a challenge, absolutely, it's a challenge.
7,000 customers are paying the brunt of a $200 million upgrade.
Well, thank you for your questions.
These numbers could come down if we get more grants.
Large customers, grants, other funding sources, yes. So if, for instance, an IMA for a surrounding town comes in and they have to buy a large capacity, for instance, create large development, maybe in Preston River water, that will definitely help bring in cash and help these situations.
I think roughly 95% of your 8,000 customers are 5/8 engineers, just to give you an idea as far as scope and size. A lot of small customers. So just to kind of revisit the financial metrics, we're going to go over the financial metrics in more detail, kind of give a comparative look across the three scenarios that we had tested. So each of the financial metrics that we're gauging it as very key is the operating income target, debt service coverage target, and the operating cash target as well. And this, I'll just go through this really quickly. We had just been talking about this a couple slides ago. But the operating income target is that 5% around rate base for the cost of service, helps fund debt service, as well as, getting some inflationary cost increases of your historical planning service. The debt service coverage target, as we talked about, it's really a measure of cash flow, operating income, add back your depreciation, amortization. Compare it to your total annual debt service. We have a 1.2 minimum for the state of Connecticut, or we're in technical default of our loan agreements or bonds. And then lastly, the operating cash balances. We currently work with a target of 180 days cash on hand, which is right in the middle of this 150, 250 day cash on hand measurement, which is the AA Moody's credit rating. So looking at operating income, and from top to bottom, we're going to show the 12%, 24% scenario, 17% scenario. Highlighted is fiscal 25. That's what we're here to talk about, is changing rates for fiscal 25. But also, we want to make sure we're paying attention to the outward years and what that looks like. This is exactly what Russ had just presented on the previous slides. So in the 12% scenario, you see that we are doing all right in 25, 26, and 27. We're above our target, but then you get to 28 when the wastewater plant comes into service and you have a significant deficiency, meaning that we'd have to have a significant rate increase come fiscal 2028 compared to 12%. Getting down to 24%, right? We're trending very well in order to get to cost of service in 2028 with some nice overperformance in 25 to 27. But then in the 17%, what we're kind of seeing is over this 5-year term, it's really a net neutral effect. We're ramping up and overperforming in 25, 26, and 27. The plant comes online. We're below cost of service, but overall, amongst these 5 years, the overall impact is really net neutral between the over and under collection. So moving on to debt coverage, same thing, 12, 24, 17, fiscal 25 highlighted. You'll see at the 12% in fiscal 25 for debt coverage, we're performing pretty well compared to the technical default line of 1.2. But then you get out to 26, 27, 28, 29, and things get extremely tight. There's really not a lot of wiggle room, a lot of buffer. We are just above the 1.2 in 26 to 27. Doesn't give us a lot of room for variables to change and things of that nature. At the 24%, much as you probably expect, we are performing a lot better. We do anticipate being above the technical default line for all 5 years in this rate track. But then getting down to the, kind of what we call the happy medium scenario, the 17%, You'll see that we do, at our lowest point, we're about 1.43 debt service coverage ratio, roughly about a 20% buffer compared to the technical default. Then lastly, operating cash. So as far as the 12% goes, you can see that days cash on hand starts to dwindle as you move out. Fiscal 25 is performing well, but then you're dropping down to 135 days, dropping down to 7 days cash on hand in 27, and then we would predict to have negative 75 days cash on hand in 2028. Right. In the 24% scenario, cash performs quite well. Actually does have a pretty good trend in the upwards direction over time. You know, looking at roughly 278 days, 343, 456, right? Nice, you know, steady increase. But then we're getting down to the 17% scenario. You'll see that cash is pretty stable amongst Great Track over the 5 years. You know, 240, 218, bottoms out at 27 at 180, which is, you know, our target. You know, and it stays around 200 and then, you know, starts to climb as the rate increases continue through 2029. So I'll kick it off the floor for recommendation. Any questions on the last couple slides?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So based on the results of this project, we are proposing a single rate change for sewer. Again, due to the variables associated with the wastewater treatment plant, a rate change for November of 2024, as opposed to a multi-year track, continuing on that process. The rate change is made up of an increase of just under 15% to the customer charge and 17.5% to the volumetric charge. For a customer with a 5/8 inch meter, which is the majority of our customers, it is a standard single-family residential service. We're looking at an average increase of a little over $13 a month. And we anticipate continued rate changes, rate increases through 2031. This proposal, it provides a balance between meeting our metrics, minimizing the increases over time to our customers, and also bringing them closer to cost of service. It promotes financial stability while minimizing the risk as we move forward. This next slide shows the estimate of the rates by meter size. So that first column is the meter size. The next column is our current rates, then followed by the proposed rates and the rate change percentage in that final column. On average, the rate change is about 14.8%. This does vary by meter size. Some add less than 10%, some at a little bit more than 15, so there is a variety. And then the volumetric change is at the 17.5, for an overall average change of that 17.1%. So the building of the wastewater treatment plant has significantly impacted the sewer rates. This project has been developed, reviewed, considered, voided, postponed for the better part of 20 years. The delays have added to the financial magnitude and complexity. As Steve mentioned, the original number was in the $50 million range, and now we have a $200 million plant that's in the process of being constructed. There are fewer than 8,000 customers, and they will pay for this project. Other municipalities do use taxes to fund projects of this magnitude. Sewer revenue requirements, 140% increase over the life of the construction of the plant, so between now and 2028. The proposed rate design at the 17%, again, gives us a balance of meeting the financial targets over time. We're proposing a schedule. We request the board set a public hearing for August 20th. We would publish the notices in early August before the hearing. And then we would look to the board to vote on the proposed rates in September, publish those rates, and have them effective November 1.
Are you proposing a consecutive 17.1% increase?
What we're recommending is a rate change in November of 2024 for that 17.1%. What we anticipate is the rate changes will continue at that level, potentially going forward. That being said, the only reason that we're asking for a rate change and not a track is that there are so many variables that when we do this analysis next year, something could change that affects that, and that rate could be different. Hopefully, it will be lower, or at least stable. If we have additional funding, additional grant funding, if we have a change in the scheduled completion date, if there's any cost
These
changes.
projections were based on 5 years of 17.1%, right?
Correct.
Yep.
That's what I thought.
So, but,
So
but it would be risky or, you know, we want to be, we don't.
Not being critical, I'm just trying to understand.
So I'm confused. A year ago, we approved a 12% increase. And we didn't, I don't think, approve a rate track,
we did not.
but we certainly looked at the rate track and we did 12% a year.
Yes, we did.
And so now, 1 year later, we want to increase the increase by 40%. What happened?
Changes.
Oh, and by the way, we got some additional grants from the state.
So when we originally did the workshop in June of last year, we were looking at 17 and a half for 5 years. Between the June workshop and the July, August, September, I believe was the last presentation that we did. We did receive some additional grant changes and we did make some adjustments based on those assumptions. But those assumptions also included a 7-year construction schedule at a level spend. When that construction schedule is actually 5 years, and the first 3 years are significantly higher, because generally speaking, when you're building something, the first several years of the construction are much higher than the last few years where you're bringing things online and testing and accepting, as opposed to where you're taking down buildings and putting up new buildings and so on and so forth. Because of that heavy load of construction at the beginning, we need to close annually on the debt from the state of Connecticut. That requires us to have that debt service coverage ratio. Again, meeting all those key metrics. Whenever there's a change in that variable, it changes the results of the analysis. And that was a significant change in that variable. The change in that construction schedule, the onboarding of the debt, the meeting of the metrics.
I'm sorry, can you do that one more time, Mike?
Of course.
Yeah. Well, at the time, the change in construction schedule is because the contractor hadn't provided metrics yet. We had an engineering estimate and it went to Nickerson, giving us what their spend and what their schedule and how fast things were going to be being done. So that was a big change in one.
So let me reiterate or try to go over this again. When we put together the analysis last year, we had a significant set of assumptions about what the construction would be for the plant. We had an assumption on cost, assumption on grant funding, and assumption on timeline. When any piece of that changes, it will change the results of this analysis. So because the cost is of the construction is more front-loaded over the beginning of that 5-year construction window, because of that, and we have to close on that debt. So every year we anticipated a level of what, about 20 million or so? Roughly 20 million in the original assumption. And the first several years have more than doubled that. Because of that, our debt coverage ratio has to change. We need to have more dollars on hand to cover that debt. The debt is still going to be over time the same number, but because we're having the loans coming on our books earlier and at a bigger number, that changes what we have to have on hand.
So does it follow that the increases will be shorter-lived?
Shorter lived, well, so we looked at the 5-year window before.
Right.
We're still looking at a 5-year window. And right now in this analysis, we see that 5 years, but we always know that there was increases out to 2030. So it's still going to be a fairly long window. That being said, every year we do this analysis, we have more information, better information, less assumptions, and we'll be able to continue to update that.
Yeah, but in general, by squishing from 7 to 5, it will bring the lower rates sooner.
The higher rates are also coming sooner too.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, there's a balance there.
At some point, 2030, 2031, we're gonna get back to regular, normal annual rate increases. But we have to get through this, window.
Yeah.
To take care of construction costs, the plant coming online, the depreciation associated with that, the return on that investment. It's huge.
It's significant with less than 8,000 customers bearing the burden of such a very large piece of infrastructure. Absolutely.
How many years is the debt service, please?
20 years.
It's only 20 years.
So after 20 years, we could have a rate decrease, right? Because we're not making any payments.
Well,
10-20-year most depreciated.
after 20 years, we may need to replace specific components within inside that plant. And as we go over the next 5 years, we'll be closing on a loan every year for 5 years. So one of those loans isn't going to be paid off until 25 plus years in the future. So as with any heavy infrastructure market, we are always going to have something that needs to be replaced. And it's just continual.
You're not gonna have $200 million.
Not again in my career.
But in 30 years, it may be a $400 million upgrade. That's nobody in this room here. I think maybe it's the youngest or but you know, that's definitely up beyond your probably careers.
So how long did this system last? Yeah, right.
This was installed in the 70s. We had to do some major upgrades.
50 years.
Yes.
So why wouldn't this new one last?
Regulatory requirements is a big driver, and we don't know what they will be. Nitrogen is a big driver in what we've done on this one. Who knows what constituent they'll be looking at? Is it PFAS? Is it many other things it could be in 20 to 30 years?
Well, we talked about how some earlier point this was $100 million project, and now it's a $200 million project. But setting aside inflation, my guess would be that the requirements for the system have also increased.
Nitrogen has pretty much stayed the same. The floodplain was a big impact. When we had to get above the 500-year flood for critical components that were only had to be above the 100-year before. And, you know, a couple of bad floods and FEMA related emergencies stopped everything. We were ready to get this project going, and they made us redesign it. And there's increased costs when we had that increased height of critical components. Now, if you look at the schedule, it allows the board a lot of time to provide questions and a lot of time to answer questions and have additional presentations in that August and in September timeframe to answer any questions. And if you want us to consider any options, we can do that. We're providing what we think is the best for the long haul. We also, everybody understands that we're going to be doing a fresh look at this again next year, and the assumptions will change, the performance of the contract will change, and potential either new customers or potential additional funding could also happen next year.
So if we had the debt, when this changes next year, will it go down to 12% or go up to 24%?
We're betting 17%, Bob.
That's where I'm sitting right now, based on what I know today.
I'm sorry. So in year 6, you're saying it's still gonna be 17% of your best guess?
No, I don't anticipate it could be 17 in year 6.
Because I think people are gonna say, gee, I understand 5 years, this, that, or maybe that. But is it forever? It can't be forever. It's gonna be
It won't be
17%.
forever. If we look at the window, what are we looking at? 13.5% over how many years?
Yeah, you're looking at, so before we propose, like, we're looking at 12.1% for a period of time out to like 2031. I think roughly, if we were to look at the same period to 2031, we're at about 13.5% over that same time
Per year?
Yeah, on average per year, but because of the debt service coverage and the timing of that, we're looking at front loading some of it in order to meet those targets.
I think now that you put in septic systems all offline.
That's not, as somebody who used to be on the, the chair of the Focus Health, that is not allowed by state law.
Right. Again, the size and scope of this project and the number of customers that we're looking at, it is very significant.
If we chose the super conservative 24% right now, you'd have a much bigger drop when you hit 5-6 years.
You're not gonna have too many people voting to put sewer in there, with this cost project.
We haven't had a sewer project in since Newton Street. When's Newton Street?
Well, that's okay before I started, so 10, plus years,
Yeah.
maybe 11 or 12 at this point.
The low hanging fruit on sewer expansion is taken up. The smaller lots, the most dense areas are taken. And as we want to expand anything, the cost becomes prohibitive just for the project, never mind for people having to pay the sewer use.
Well, and one of the social considerations here is that people who have the 8,000 customers who have sewers, a lot of them are lower income. Basically, the sewers were in the old CCD, if you want to call it that, and septic systems were in the town consolidated district. And that's where, I don't know if Cherry Hill has sewers or not. I don't have sewers. Lots of people don't have sewers.
And Bob,
If it gets really, if it becomes a real problem in town, the city council can take up whether they want to chip in. Basically, I'm just saying.
no, and they chip in and it's socializing across the entire tax base, right? Right.
Yeah, it's widespread.
Yeah, but if you're in Glastonbury or Weathersfield, you get out in the country, there's no sewer, but they're paying as part of their taxes for some of these increases at NBC. But Bob, when we look at these, the lower income customers, the majority of these are renters.
Yeah.
And, the landlords pay the sewer, but that gets passed on in rent. So it does impact all of our customers.
Renters are utilized as source of revenue.
So the rates are posted as the actual rates. It isn't a percentage in the legal notice.
I mean, that's the truth. The dollar increase is not.
But I would expect that clear set, they don't want to worry about this.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And we can sit down, we already explained the percentage, well,
Yeah.
30%, it's 34 cents a day.
Yeah.
She has been through too many rate adjustments to
No,
not
I-
ask for that yet.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I'm burned out.
Okay.
I don't think we have much choice, really.
No.
In the end, no, we don't. I mean, the data is the data. We need the rate increases. It's,
We have the backup information.
All right, well, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Russ and Amanda. Very good.
And they're going to go on their way tonight. They are heading back to the Midwest, so.
Thank you. All righty, we'll move on to the project labor agreement discussion. Chris, who would you like to present for that?
I get to present on this one. How about that? Okay.
Safe trip.
Right, so we did provide a resolution, I'll go over the details. There's no urgency to get this done tonight, and this is another one where we can have plenty of discussion and go into some of the details of a potential project labor agreement resolution. That we do. Next one. Back in May, the city council was provided with 3 of our projects for funding approval, actually 4, Lead Copper was another one. And the 4 projects that were in front of them, they delayed the public hearing on this so they could consider adding project labor agreements to these 4 projects. Immediately, I engaged them on Lead and Copper. There was really no positive reason to go with PLA at all on that. It was mostly consultants, it was mostly assessments, it was not construction. So we were able to get that through quickly. And then we only had the 2 water tank aeration projects and the Bosner Bridge project to discuss. Corporation Council and Bond Council were both in agreement that the NPU board has the authority over the project details and not the city council. But as you all heard Joe come in, there's some passion and there's some, positive aspects of having a project labor agreement. The 3 projects that we were still on the books in front of the council were not conducive to PLAs, and I'll get into some of the levels down the road. And the city council eventually approved the drinking water state revolving fund projects in June, unanimously with no discussion of PLA.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay, so what we bringing forth to the board is a proposed resolution to consider a PLA on projects meeting the following criteria. Construction costs over $5 million. A project that is likely to employ at least 25 non-managerial or non-administrative workers performing construction. So real construction labor in an estimated duration of over 30 construction days. Are these industry standards? This was discussions with Rick and Mike from Coleman Conley. This was talking over what is a significant use of labor. Where would maybe apprenticeships and Norwich contractor kind of pieces that go into a PLA be a worthwhile effort? If it's something that is not a lot of dollars, is it going to be, how many jobs are we going to create here that will be helpful? Yeah.
I did some research on my own, and that 5 million seems kind of low. The projects I saw that the PLD were using, 10, 20.
And once again, that's an arbitrary number that could go
I
significantly
think
higher.
the ones that I saw that were used, that were the 10, 20, 30 million.
Yeah, when we're looking at schools where they're talking about putting this in place, $350 million, right? It's very significant. And I think as Rick described to the board last month, it doesn't come at no cost because you're adding people to the job and also additional requirements to the job. So
That was one thing they said too, was it did increase cost.
yes,
There's no evaluation or studies done where it decreased the cost of that job done.
and I think Rick had talked, he's seen studies that say 2%, he's seen studies that say 20%. And, depending on what project, it could be somewhere in there, but it's definitely more. Thank you.
So I'm not sure who the people are that they're going to add to the project. What are the criteria for who gets added and
That would be a board decision. It is not, there's no, no one out there who describes what a PLA has to be.
okay, because if somebody went to trade school, they don't compete in school. It could be wrong.
Well, yes and no, because when you become an apprentice out of trade school, you have to have hours. And if you're in the trade unions, you'll get those hours. But this may be a more of an incentive to have more apprentices and more people untrained on that project. To get qualifying hours.
Yeah, I think if people have already made an effort to advance themselves in the profession, it's probably good. If somebody just hasn't done anything, I can't see it.
But this would be training, and this would be Norwich residency field, we'd be adding. Any project that we do of substantial money where we're getting funding is requiring Bacon Davis wages. So you're paying union wages with or without PLA. And you're required to do, minority women based, Buy American. There's a lot of things that are tied to every one of our projects. Barry's got that on gas. Larry has had it for water and sewer forever. But, maybe we haven't had that on a substation, but we haven't got there yet. We will be on 34.5 at a substation, but that's not likely to be getting other funding sources. So it will not be something that has requirements necessarily, but everything else pretty much does.
So with the 17.1% increase in the sewer rates, I don't think we should even think about adding more cost to any sewer.
I don't disagree, and
That's the same.
yeah. So if we were to go down this path, and once again, we do not have to, we're not being forced to, and if we were to go down this path, it would be on a case by case basis. So, okay, we're going to be doing a weather training for $80 million. That's the next major path, right? If it meets the criteria that the board said we want to do it on, does it make sense? The sewer rate payers are paying too much. We don't want to have to pay for an apprentice on it. If it's a gas project, like a future next year's, for instance, grant money, it won't cost the ratepayers more, but we'll get less work done. So there is a cost, but it won't be a dollar cost to the utility. Is that worth getting apprentices down the road? Many more people potentially pull from or help knowledge people. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That's really a board decision. And it doesn't, everyone will impact rates.
So what if we went out and gave bidders an option to give us a price with the PLA and a price without the PLA?
I don't know if that would limit or not the bidders. We can address that in our last
I think
meeting.
I think we talked to Rick about that, and I, for like, I cannot remember the answer, but I think that was something we did ask.
Yeah, I can ask that question again, and Rick is able to come at the next meeting. We invited Rick and Mike here tonight. Both had higher commitments.
Well, I mean, the benefit of something like that is that we're all talking about theory right now. You know, was it a good thing that a PLA or not a PLA? If we have a bid with a PLA and without a PLA, and the difference is negligible, the PLA. If the difference in the bids is significant, maybe you don't. But you certainly have a justification for not doing it.
Discussion last month with these goals.
Yes,
So you would say you have to hire 3 apprentices. You would say that you would set a goal of hiring 3 apprentices, something like that.
yes.
So the person could agree to the PLA and set the goals, and maybe they don't meet that. That's a possibility, but they try or something.
I think the expectation would be you have to put a good faith effort at best, you know, at least.
It's kind of discriminatory too, for the non-union contract.
I think when we talk about the Boston Bridge project, we have a great non-union contractor who might be in a sweet spot here in town, right? And, you know, there's not a lot of union shops working out of Norwich. I mean, you do have, you know, the local, but
But that doesn't have to be union, this has to be Davis Bacon.
yeah.
Right. So,
But typically union shops bid on project labor agreements. And once again, we came up with something that might meet the intent that could be usable. Staff is not recommending we go with the PLA route. This was something, just generate discussion and see where the board wants to go.
Well, the council will hold you up either.
I don't see that happening. And we also need a supermajority for any of these projects if we're going to be going for funding. The next sewer project or the next, you know, clean water, drinking water, we need to have the majority. So if we said, we're only going to do this to the PLA, one caucus may say no, one caucus may say yes, and we get denied either one. But the board is the one who dictates how we manage, you know, a sewer project or a water project or any project. And, yeah, so if, you know, if I'm not hearing, you know, there's no reason we have to have a vote on the PLA tonight. If there's more questions like to have answered. If you would like to vote yes or no, that's also the board's prerogative.
well, you said you were going to check. I would love to see what the answer is to doing a dual bid. And whether it's practical as well as whether it's.
Yep. Yeah, so we will engage with both the city, first city director, and we'll also engage with Rick, and he'll be able to provide the answer and be able to answer questions at the next meeting.
All right, very well. So all that being said, there will not be a vote tonight on the PLA resolution. We have 2 action items, naming would be a vote to approve the referral of the natural gas grant to the Commission of the City Plan. That is the 2024 grant, I believe.
22.
2022.
And here's why we're doing this. Normally, when we have drinking water state revolving fund or clean water fund, board passes a resolution, then the city gets that resolution. They do the first reading and they refer it to the Commission on the City Plan. Because this grant has no funding component needing approval by the city council. we need to refer here to this, to the Commission on a City Plan. This will be in line with with the plan on conservation development. There's no hiccups on a project like this. It's actually been discussed in the plan of conservation development meetings, so I'm on that committee. So, and Deanna knows it's gonna be coming. So this is a check mark saying that it meets the city's long-term goals. And then once that's happened, then we can award it.
Okay, all right, thank you, Chris. All right, so that's a description of the rest of the referral to the city plan. So I'll entertain a motion to approve that.
This is the PLA resolution?
No, that's the second one. Second one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Referral to the use of the city plan.
I'll make that.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
I have a second by Michael. All right, is there any discussion on the referral? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Very well. And moving on to the vote for the scheduled public hearing on August 20th for the sewer efficiency rate setting. Or discussed.
No, the sewer rate and the efficiency
Vote to
rate.
schedule public hearing for sewer efficiency rate.
The sewer and efficiency.
I guess last time, sorry. Sewer and efficiency rate,
Two ratings.
two rates on August 20th, 2024. All right. The efficiency rate was the 0.24 cents, right? A quarter of a penny, right? Isn't that what it was?
So it should be a vote for each,
Right.
two different public hearings. I do at the same time as you said.
I hear you. Okay. It's a vote, schedule a public hearing for the sewer rate increase and the efficiency rate increase we discussed here tonight. Set for August 20th, 2024. All right. Is there any discussion on that vote for the public hearing, scheduled public hearing? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. August 20th it is. All right, that brings us to executive session. Need a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Michael. All those in favor say aye. And all those opposed say nay. All right, we're in executive session. Chris, would you like to stay behind?
All right, so there's going to be a brief presentation that I want Jeff, Steve, Chris, and Simone to stay for, and then we'll finish up with that.
Okay, very well.
And Ruth, you're welcome to come back next month. Thank you. That's everyone tonight.
All right, I should say this is to discuss confidential trade, secret and commercially valuable confidential proprietary information not subject to inspection or public disclosure pursuant to section 1210(5) and 7232A of the Connecticut Trade Statutes. This information is commercially valuable, confidential, and proprietary, not subject to public disclosure pursuant to Public Act 98-212, and also to discuss personnel matters of an employee or employees and or public official pursuant to chapter 14, section 1206A of the Connecticut General Statutes. And with that, we're in executive session.
Can you pull up the,
Stop recording.